All right, class, let's continue our discussion on obesity and the BMI. We're going to focus on chapter 9 of your text and sections specifically on nutrition and weight control. So first, let's talk about what the definition of obese is. Obesity is officially defined as having a BMI of over 30. If that is the case for an individual, he or she is going to be obese. Now, this BMI is a general guide. Yes, there are lots and lots of exceptions. If somebody has an extreme excess of skeletal muscle mass or they have extreme lack of skeletal muscle mass, those are the two notable exceptions. But for most individuals, the vast majority of people, including those who reject the BMI is actually a pretty accurate representation. Our BMI doesn't take into account gender, fitness, or bone structure. Fitness being the single biggest cause of the BMI not being accurate. Another big notable exception would be if somebody has a large amputation. Then the BMI is not going to apply to them as well. Now, if we look at our BMI, let's look at me, for example. I am someone who weighs about 250 pounds, we'll say. That's the one I'm closest to. And I am 5'10", so hey, I am in the grossly obese range, even though my waistline is underneath 40. So while BMI, generally speaking, will work fairly well for most people, there are going to be some other factors that can be looked at as well, one of which is waistline. Generally speaking, if we're looking at our BMI, we don't want to be super duper thin, and we don't want to be super duper heavy. We want to be somewhere in between for the weight range. The healthy weight range is represented in blue here. So let's talk about somebody who weighs 175 pounds. It's a pretty standard weight for an American. If you weigh 175 pounds and you're between 5'10", and it looks like, we could probably project up and say 6'8", you are going to be within that healthy weight range. Or, for example, if you are 150 pounds and are between 6'4" and 5'5", you would be within that healthy weight range. Oofta. According to this chart, I really need to lose some weight as I'm looking at this guy here. So, why should we be concerned with high BMI or obese BMIs? Why is that a problem in the United States? Well, first of all, obesity has doubled in the United States within the last 20 years. But again, why is obesity a problem? Obesity is a problem because obesity is associated with chronic diseases. In the United States, approximately 1/3 of adults are obese, and it's also now fairly common in children and adolescents as well. And it's also found that obesity tends to increase with income levels as well within the United States. It's been found that people that have increased obesity have an increased risk of premature death, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disorder, stroke, gallbladder disease, respiratory system dysfunction, osteoarthritis, and other particular cancers as well, such as pancreatic cancer. Obesity is now the single most expensive condition or disease in the United States. Now, everybody wants a magic pill. I would love to lose 20 pounds of body fat. The problem is, I do not necessarily want to put forth the effort to lose 20 pounds of body fat. So I'll seek out some trendy diet programs like the Pitkin diets, Atkins diet, Zone and South Beach diets. These are diets that are going to be high carb, low carb, no carb, high plant, no plant, or simple diets. And these diet programs, generally speaking, aren't very effective. Yes, there's always going to be that poster person or that poster child that says, this worked great for me. But generally speaking, trendy diet programs aren't effective. Prescription drugs have been successful in very small circumstances or very narrow ranges of circumstances. But the problem with prescription drugs is that there's also going to be a lot of negative side effects associated with all the drugs that have currently hit the market that focus on increasing metabolism and decreasing appetite. There are some surgical procedures that have been used to help people lose weight, such as gastroplasty, the removal of a portion of the stomach or partitioning of the stomach so that you can't store as much food and it's physically impossible, or physically more difficult, I should say, to eat larger meals. The patient that goes through this gastroplasty and gastric bypass surgeries or gastric banding surgeries are going to be physically forced to eat smaller portion sizes. Now, many patients that go through these surgeries are going to cheat. They are going to just continually eat food throughout the day, and if they never have those periods of time where they don't stop eating, even though their stomach can't hold as much food, their stomach is constantly being supplied with food. So they are effectively negating the effects of their surgery. Sometimes individuals will have liposuction. This is going to be the removal of fat cells. You can think of liposuction as filleting a person from the inside. You are quite literally ripping the tissues out of their bodies from the inside. Liposuction, again, is not something that should be highly recommended. It's a traumatic procedure for the human body. Now, it can be used for overweight people that are not obese or morbidly obese. Individuals that are obese and morbidly obese have so much adipose tissue that the liposuction of that adipose tissue would result in very severe, very unhealthy complications. To understand how to best lose weight and manage weight, we first need to understand what nutrients are. A nutrient is any component of a food that performs a physiological function. And there are many kinds of nutrients. Generally speaking, it's better to have more nutrients than less nutrients, as long as we have the right kinds of nutrients. We have carbs, proteins, and lipids as the energy-yielding macro unit nutrients, and then we'll have minerals and vitamins as the non-energy yielding accessory nutrients. So let's focus on carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are known as sugars, sometimes also known as complex carbs or polysaccharides. These complex carbs or polysaccharides can be turned into simple sugars within our digestive tract, and these are going to be the preferred energy source for our cells. Refined grains, generally speaking, should be minimized in the diet. These refined grains should be minimized because they don't have as much fiber or vitamins in them. For example, white breads, cakes, cookies. Complex carbs that are recommended should be complex carbs that have vitamins and minerals associated with them, such as beans, whole grain bread products, nuts, and fruits. Those carbohydrates are very beneficial to our diets because not only do they have the macronutrients that yield energy, but they have lots of the accessory micronutrients as well. It is possible for carbohydrates to be harmful, yes. If a patient has an excess of refined sugars in their bodies, or an excess of fructose, which is a refined sugar, that can contribute to obesity. Particularly, we need to emphasize the excess of these. Small amounts of refined sugar, small amount of fructose sweeteners does not directly contribute to obesity. The problem is that these refined sugars are highly addictive for many individuals, and it's very easy to cross over the threshold from moderation to excess with these refined sugars. These foods can cause the pancreas to work very hard by secreting large amounts of insulin to help negate the spike in blood sugar. As the patient is increasing in body volume and increasing their insulin production, there's increased amounts of insulin resistance in many of these patients that can lead to type 2 diabetes. Now, something that should be emphasized is that fat deposition can increase an increase of coronary heart disease. So as patients have increased amounts of sugars and increased amounts of insulin resistance, they are going to have increased amounts of adipose or fat generation in their bodies. And this increased fat deposition can cause other health problems associated with cardiovascular disease. We also should, when looking at carbohydrates, need to spend some time focusing on the glycemic index. If a patient is diabetic, they need to avoid high glycemic index carbohydrates. These are carbohydrates that cause blood sugar to go up rapidly and quickly. Generally speaking, simple sugars or highly refined sugars are going to be high glycemic index foods. Unrefined sugars or unrefined foods or whole grain foods are going to have lower glycemic index. So if we want to reduce the glycemic index of somebody, we should eat fewer sweetened foods or refined foods, and we should focus on unprocessed fresh fruits or canned fruits that don't have the heavy syrup. Focus on light syrup or no syrup. Don't use as much sugar. Most people can, or other refined honey sugars as well. We should also add maple syrup to that list as well. I came from Wisconsin in the Northwoods. There's lots of maple syrup out there. Most people find that even if you are still doing your baking or your cooking and you cut the amount of sugar in half that you add to the recipe, it can still taste really good. sweetened breakfast cereals, generally speaking, have very high amounts of refined sugars and very high amounts of simple sugars in them. Focus less on jelly, jams, and preserves, and focus more on fresh fruits. Artificial fruit juices, generally speaking, are going to have high glycemic indexes. Now, you'll find as a marketing ploy that a lot of food companies now will say that they don't have high fructose corn syrup added to their beverages or to their products, but instead they'll just have regular corn syrup, or they'll just have fruit juice concentrate. Fruit juice concentrate is a great way to add those high amounts of simple sugars, but still avoid a lot of the public backlash that we're having against fructose or high fructose corn syrups. So if we focus on fruit juices that have been unprocessed. Fruit juices made from concentrate, or fruit juice cocktails in particular, generally speaking, don't have enough water added to fully reconstitute them, which means that they're artificially going to be higher in simple sugar content and sweeter tasting. Focus on spices during cooking as opposed to sugars to flavor food. Don't put sugar in your tea and coffee. Coffee all by itself, with no cream, no sugar, is about 2 or 3 calories per 8-ounce cup of coffee. It's effectively a no-calorie beverage. The same also applies to tea. If there's no cream or sugar added, or no extra flavorings added, generally speaking, tea and coffee is going to be effectively 0 calories. And then finally, avoid highly processed foods or rice, pastas, and potatoes. Let's move on to proteins. Proteins are made by 20, in our human beings at least, are made by 20 different amino acids. Some of these amino acids we can make in our bodies, other amino acids we cannot make in our bodies. The ones that we cannot make in our bodies are known as essential amino acids. We need to get those amino acids through our diet. We must eat them. If we have a complete protein in our diet, we're going to have all of those essential amino acids present. Now, your textbook currently says that there are 8 essential amino acids. Some textbooks, particularly some of the older textbooks, say that there are 9 amino acids that we need to obtain through diet. These complete proteins are almost always going to be from a source of animal protein, like a meat or a dairy, but can be from a mixture of rice and beans, or from tofu or soy milk. It is possible to have a non-animal source of a complete protein, but it's more difficult. If somebody is having an incomplete protein, they're going to have a protein that's missing at least one of those essential amino acids that they need. Good examples of incomplete proteins include legumes, nuts, grains, etc., etc. But you can mix and match multiple incomplete proteins together to get a complete protein and get all of those essential 20 amino acids you need in your body diet. Amino acids that generally speaking, cannot be stored in the body. So a small amount, 2 to 3 meat servings a day, are all we need to get all of our amino acids. Excessive amino acid consumption isn't going to cause us to stockpile amino acids. Instead, it's going to cause us to have some respiratory and blood pH issues if we have too many amino acids in our diets. Is it possible to have proteins be harmful for us? Yes, if somebody eats too many proteins, they can have dehydration set in. This dehydration can set in because of the way that we digest proteins results in our bodies using up lots of excessive water, or lots of our excess water. Also, we use proteins to help regulate our body fluid volumes. So if we have excessive protein consumption, that can throw off our body fluid volumes slightly. We aren't going to go into it in extreme detail, but there are some particular acids that are produced, and some particular basic compounds as well, that are produced as we process proteins that can also throw off our blood pH balance. Eating too many proteins can also lead to calcium loss in our urine, which can then cause that excess calcium to build up in the urine and then crystallize in the kidneys, causing kidney stones. Excess dietary calcium can also lead to kidney stone formation as well. Excessive red meat ingestion is going to cause patients or individuals to eat lots of saturated fats. Generally speaking, saturated fats are going to lead to cardiovascular disease. Those are diseases that are diseases associated with the heart or with the blood vessels, the vasculature. Speaking of fats, let's talk about lipids. A lipid technically is a macronutrient that does not dissolve in water. More broadly speaking, though, it's just fat, oil, and cholesterol. Now we have both saturated and unsaturated fats. Usually saturated fats come from animals and are solid at room temperature. And this is one of the reasons why saturated fats aren't, generally speaking, promoted for individuals, because those saturated fats are more likely to be solid and clog up the cardiovascular system. Unsaturated fats are usually liquids at room temperature and less likely to clog the cardiovascular system. Unsaturated fats are going to typically come from plants. Now, if we look at our fats, we have some essential fatty acids. These essential fatty acids are just like our essential amino acids. These are fatty acids that we need to ingest. We cannot make them in our bodies. These essential fatty acids include linoleic acid, and these are going to be found in polyunsaturated oils. These polyunsaturated oils are going to be present in corn or sunflower, not safflower, sunflower oils. That's a typo right there, my bad. Sorry about that. Our lipids such as olive and canola oil are going to have monounsaturated fats. If we look at one such monounsaturated fat, omega-3 fatty acids, these unsaturated fats are thought to ward off heart diseases in individuals and are going to be present at high concentrations in some fish and some plant species. As we look at the breakdown of the different sources of fat, if we look at canola oil has mostly monounsaturated fat with some polyunsaturated fats. Olive oil is also the same way. Olive oil has lots of monounsaturated fats with some polyunsaturated as well. If we look at the sunflower oil, this is going to have mostly polyunsaturated fats. So these that contain mostly unsaturated fats will be liquids at room temperature. They are the oils. If we look at the fats, generally speaking, these have a high amount of saturated fat. And they are going to typically be solids at room temperature. This cardiovascular disease that results in many individuals typically will result from their arteries being blocked by a plaque. And this plaque will have lots of cholesterol and saturated fats in it. There are two kinds of cholesterol that can be in the body. One is low-density lipoprotein. This is a bad cholesterol, and this is a bad cholesterol not because it's low density, but because it's carrying cholesterol from the liver to the cells of the body. This low-density lipoprotein is increased by the amount of saturated fats in the bodies and is decreased by the amount of unsaturated fat in the diet and in the body. High-density lipoproteins, HDL, is considered a good cholesterol because it's carrying cholesterol to the liver where it's being converted to bile salts. And once that cholesterol is converted to a bile salt, that cholesterol is going to be lost from the body. Sometimes if you look at the bottle, a container, and it contains hydrogenated oil, those hydrogenated oils are going to have a lot of trans fatty acids in them. Now, if it has partially hydrogenated, I should say, it has lots of trans fatty acids. If it has fully hydrogenated oil, a fully hydrogenated oil will not have those trans fatty acids. Trans fats or trans fatty acids, generally speaking, are not considered good fats. They're generally speaking considered bad fats. They do not occur in nature, first of all, and then secondly, they are chemically more stable than cis fatty acids. And because trans fatty acids are chemically more stable, they are more difficult, they are more energy intensive for our body to break down and clear from our bloodstreams. So how can you reduce bad fat and cholesterol in your diet? You can eat more poultry and fish and less red meat. You can remove the fat or skin from the meat that you're eating. Don't fry, boil, or bake. You can limit the amount of butter and cream and trans fats and tropical oils. You can use herbs and spices as opposed to butter and margarine. You can focus on skim milk instead of whole milk to reduce saturated fats and trans fats. And then finally, to reduce dietary cholesterol, you can avoid excessive cheese and egg yolk and liver consumption. You can substitute egg whites for egg yolks in cooking and eating, and you can increase soluble fiber in your diet. Oat bran, for example, oatmeal, brands, beans, or apple, citrus fruits are going to have lots of soluble fiber. Don't have too much soluble fiber, though. That can lead to diarrhea. Let's focus on minerals. Minerals do not yield calories. Our body is going to contain greater than 5 grams of each major mineral and less than 5 grams of each trace mineral. So 5 grams is the threshold mark. The major minerals are going to be a major component of the cells of our bodies. For example, calcium. We have more than 5 grams of calcium in our body. Minor minerals, though, are going to be the minor components of our larger molecules. For example, the iron within the hemoglobin of our red blood cells makes up less than 5 grams of our total body mass. Most diets are going to have a variety of multiple minerals in them and provide us with all the minerals that we need. Calcium, in particular, is used to make bone, it's used to send nerve impulses, and it's used to contract our muscles. So calcium is a very major mineral. We use it for many important things in our bodies. It's recommended that we get at least 1,000 milligrams per day or 1 gram per day of calcium to keep our bones healthy early in life. And post-menopause, it's recommended that you get 1.3 grams or 1,300 milligrams of calcium per day if you are postmenopausal. To aid with calcium absorption, calcium ingestion should be paired with vitamin D, and that vitamin D increases the amount of calcium absorption and helps prevent bone loss due to a lack of calcium. That bone loss due to a lack of calcium is almost always going to be referred to as osteoporosis. Sodium is another major mineral in our body. We use it to regulate water balance in our bodies. It's recommended that the average adult receive at least half a gram or 500 milligrams of sodium per day. Now, if we look at a typical American diet, we get way more than that per day. A typical American will have about 4 to 5 grams of sodium in their diet per day. Excessive sodium ingestion can increase or lead to high blood pressure, hypertension in individuals who already have high blood pressure. For example, let's say somebody has a water softener in their salt or in their house. In those situations, most water softeners use sodium chloride to soften the water and remove calcium carbonate and magnesium carbonate from the water supply. But if somebody has high blood pressure or hypertension, they can switch to potassium chloride pellets in their water softener to reduce their sodium intake. Many of the major minerals of the body include calcium, phosphorus in terms of phosphate ions, potassium ions, sulfur, sodium, chlorine, and magnesium. Major or minor minerals include zinc, iron, copper, iodine, selenium, and manganese. One of the things that always stood out for me with selenium is that selenium not only is used to help minimize hair loss, but selenium is also an essential component of the flagella of a sperm cell. So if a male is suffering from infertility, oftentimes they'll be put on a selenium oxate supplement. Let's focus on vitamins. Unlike minerals, which are simple elements typically from the periodic table, vitamins are going to be organic compounds that contain carbon but don't give us calories, don't yield calories for us. And we'll use them in very low quantities in our bodies. Vitamins are typically going to be enzyme helpers or coenzymes that help the enzymes in our bodies work better. We have 13 total vitamins that have been identified in the human diet, and they have been broken up into 2 broad groups: the vitamins that we can dissolve in water, the water-soluble ones, and the ones that we cannot dissolve in the water, the fat-soluble vitamins. Fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K, ADDEC, and our fat-soluble vitamins are essential to keep in our diets, but it's easy to overdose on fat-soluble vitamins. They can build up into toxic concentrations in our body. These fat-soluble vitamins are why your parents didn't let you eat all the Fred Flintstone multivitamin pills you wanted to when you were younger. Yes, those Fred Flintstone multivitamin pills taste fantastic. Trust me, I love them. I still use Fred Flintstone multivitamin pills. But they contain fat-soluble vitamins that will build up in higher and higher concentrations in your body, and you can potentially overdose on them if you eat too many of your multivitamins in one sitting. Our water-soluble vitamins are very difficult to overdose on. If you want to pop vitamin C pills like candy, go for it. It's going to be expensive. You'll have really expensive urine. And you'll probably get sick of the taste of vitamin C, but it's almost impossible to overdose on vitamin C. If you have excessive vitamin C consumption, let's say you consume 2 or 3 grams of vitamin C per day, you could eventually have some of these symptoms associated with diarrhea is one of the first signs of excessive vitamin C consumption. But generally speaking, to reach the toxic levels of our water-soluble vitamins, you have to ingest incredibly high amounts of them. There's a reason why there's unknowns listed here for the toxicity levels, because we can urinate out excessive water-soluble vitamins very rapidly. When we look at our fat-soluble vitamins, we know the toxicity or toxic effects of every fat-soluble vitamin because it's very easy to overdose on fat-soluble vitamins. When we look at antioxidants, an antioxidant is any chemical that can reduce the amount of free electrons in our body or the rate of oxidation in our bodies. Most of this oxidation or most of these free electrons are going to be thought of as free radicals. Many of these free radicals come from a metabolic process known as the electron transport chain within the mitochondria, and it'll be superoxide, peroxides, and disoxides. These are free radical oxygen species that are a temporary byproduct of making ATP. And if we consume vitamin C, vitamin E, and vitamin A, these vitamins are considered antioxidants. They are considered molecules that will neutralize these reactive oxygen species or free radicals that can damage other parts of our cells. Vitamins that are found in fruits and vegetables, these C, D's, or the C's, E's, and A's, these vitamins are commonly found in fruits and vegetables. So eat your plants. My favorite piece of nutrition advice comes from a textbook that I used to teach a class on human nutrition. And it can be summed up in two sentences. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Most individuals are very focused on eating a lot of one food group and hardly any of another food group. It's important to eat real food, so focus on real food, not necessarily these syrups or these highly processed things. You should have mostly plants in your diet because having mostly meat or animal products in your diet are going to lead to many disease states. And then finally, don't eat too many calories. Keep your overall calorie consumption low. But let's talk about the government guidelines or the daily food recommendations. Generally speaking, you should have mostly fruit or mostly plants, a little bit of animal protein, a little bit of dairy, and then we should also emphasize that the size of this plate is not enormous. Overall calorie consumption also is something to be key or to be considered. You don't want to exceed or you don't want to ingest more calories than you're burning. If you are ingesting more calories than you're burning, you are going to have weight gain. If you are burning more calories than you're ingesting, you will have weight loss. For most people, you want to have an equilibrium or a balance between calories consumed and calories burned to maintain your body weight. Some eating disorders associated with calorie consumption are going to be anorexia nervosa, or just anorexia for short. This is somebody who's very scared of becoming fat, and it's going to usually result in them having self-induced starvation. They will intentionally avoid food or have incredibly high physical activities and will have excessive calorie deficits day after day after day. These individuals become excessively thin. They can tend to have underweight BMIs. There's also bulimia or bulimia nervosa. In this disorder, individuals will eat large amounts of high-calorie foods, the binge, followed by a purge to avoid weight gain. Many times, if they're bulimic, the purge will be considered vomiting, where they will induce vomiting to purge the high-calorie foods from their stomach. So this can happen multiple times per day. But the purging, generally speaking, is going to be induced vomiting. Binge eating disorder is when somebody is going to have overeating. And this is typically going to be on an obese individual. So this person has an excessive body weight or excessive BMI greater than 30, and they will overeat but not have that binge. These individuals oftentimes are going to have depression or anxiety, and that depression and anxiety will lead to more binges, which causes them to become larger, which causes them to have more depression, which causes them to have more binges. It's a positive feedback loop. It's can be very debilitating for many obese individuals. And then another body eating disorder or body image disorder is muscle dysmorphia. These are individuals that feel like their muscles, their skeletal muscles, are too small, that they're underdeveloped. You'll find these individuals at the gym, and they'll typically be preoccupied with bodybuilding and bulking up, and they are the individuals that look excessively buff. They are, generally speaking, going to be described as abnormally buff or ripped to the point of being unattractive by most individuals. So someone with anorexia nervosa, even though they may be at a healthy body weight, when they look in the mirror, they perceive themselves as being overweight. Somebody who has bulimia nervosa will binge eat high-calorie foods and then purge by vomiting, but generally speaking, they are not characterized as obese. And then somebody with muscle dysmorphia is going to have abnormally developed skeletal muscle features on their bodies. So, class, concept check. Which of the following contains appreciable amounts of calories? More than one of these will, so you'll have to select multiples, but not all of the options below. Go ahead and rewind the video, check the notes, check the internet, because I didn't talk about alcohol. I will just tell you right now, alcohol does contain calories. 7 calories per gram for alcohol. There, now you have all the information you need in, I should also mention nucleic acids do not contain appreciable amounts of calories. Okay, now this video has all the information you need to answer the question. So rewind the video, check your notes, or check your textbook, and get me an answer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okie dokie. Carbohydrates, alcohol, protein, and lipids contain appreciable amounts of calories. Minerals, vitamins, nucleic acids, and antioxidants do not contain appreciable amounts of calories. That's all we have for our presentation on Chapter 9 on the digestive system. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email, post them in the class discussion board, or stop by my office when you're on campus. Happy studies!